Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Cyberstarter Season 1, Episode 3, the Time episode. If you are looking for a highly engaging and relevant discussion focused on cybersecurity entrepreneurship, covering topics from how to start a business to challenges entrepreneurs encounter to strategies for effective problem solving, buckle up, my friend, because you are in for a treat, because that's what we're doing every single Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Cyberstarter Show. And today is no exception. We're going to be joined by an amazing individual. Some of you may recall him from Simply Cyber Live, Ian Garrett from Phalanx, but more about him in a minute. I want to say shout out to everybody in chat. I see Luke Canfield, Casually Joseph, Brian Peak, a lot of squad members in here, James Driscoll, Malik. It's good to see everybody. Ryan, this episode, by the way, I'm sorry. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Ryan Leirvik, CEO of Neuvik and author of, what's the book you authored, Ryan?
Really catchy title, Understand, Manage, and Measure Cyber Risk.
Yeah, you know what? It's spot on the nose. My morning show is called Daily Cyber Threat Brief, and guess what it is? Daily Cyber Threat and Brief. Yeah, so my man Ryan over here is going to be joining me and helping me piece through today. Today is the time episode, and believe me, people, when you hear the phrase "time is money" or "time is the most valuable asset we have," it may seem like just passing words or whatever, trite thing to say, but in reality, in the entrepreneurship world, time is money because you only have so much of it. Ryan, what are your experiences with time when it comes relative to you and your business?
There just is never enough, right? There just isn't, right? And you're forced with your life things that are going on, the business items that you're trying to get to. You clearly don't have a lot of other resources other than time. Like sometimes you don't have a lot of people. So it all kind of falls on your shoulders starting a business of like, all right, where's your time really actually go when you're starting a business, especially as a practitioner, which a lot of people are, right? We want to practice our trade, but there's a lot of unintuitive items that the business needs that you don't necessarily think through. So that's typically where things go. So trying to be practical here. I'm looking forward to today's conversation with Ian because we get a sense for like, all right, really, where's your time actually go for those that are trying to understand like, what's the balance in time when we get starting a business?
Yeah, 100%. And, Ian has a very successful business right now. So learning from him about how he spends his time and the kind of strategies and methodology he uses to understand how to apply that time is going to be massive value for all of you in chat. And remember, if you have any questions, do drop them in chat. I will flag them and we will get to them throughout the show with our friend Ian. When I think of time, Ryan, I mean, I'm living in this problem right now of I'm trying to get my Cyber 101 course. It's like the next big project that I have to get out there. And there's all sorts of small things that you really never accounted for. You're like, oh, I'll just like with any project or with any product or with anything, you're like, oh, it's simple. You do 1, 2, 3. It's like a Pinterest blog post where you're like, oh, I can go from a wood pallet to like a rocking chair in 3 steps. But in reality, there's like, steps like 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D. There's, the pallet breaks. You got to go get another pallet. Like there's a million different things that get involved and you get a splinter in your leg and you're like, it didn't mention I should have planed this thing. So how you spend the time and more importantly, I would argue if you think of like you only have 6 bullets in your gun, right? You got a revolver and you're going to use that gun to make business and make money and solve things. It's easy to get distracted by the shiny thing and waste time running after that other thing. But if you think about it as like, I've only got 6 shots, so I got to make them count if I'm going to eat dinner tonight or if I'm going to eat dinner this week and provide for my family. And I think some of those logics really apply in how I approach spending my time, or choosing how to spend my time on business.
Yeah, but it's not easy, but the simple is ruthless prioritization, right? Yeah. Just getting the prioritization, but you need to have the family and the team. Ben mentioned this last week, right? All the pieces that are in your life to line that up, because one thing shows up and like, your pallet breaks and you don't have any backup. Guess who owns it? You do.
Yeah,
you gotta fix it. So having help and support and just being identifying what the priority really is and sticking to it it's really hard to do, but simple in theory, but hard to do in practice,
Yeah, I think ruthless prioritization might be my new like internal slogan for the business here.
Yeah, I heard that from Lee Solt, by the way, so I don't take that as my own.
Okay, all right. Well, quoted and royalties paid. I love it. So let's bring our guest in here. Today's guest is Ian Garrett. He is the CEO and co-founder of the cybersecurity startup Phalanx. And he was a U.S. Army cyber officer, as well as a data scientist in the defense sector. He combines his operational knowledge with his PhD research to bring unique insights to the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. And if that sounds like I just described multiple people, rest assured, it is just one individual. He is just maxing it out. So when we're talking about how he does his time management for his family, for his PhD, for his work, for his business, it is going to be really, really eye-opening. Let's go get our friend Ian and get into the time episode. Hey, what's up, Ian? How are you, man?
How's it going? Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it. You like that little kind of intro
100%.
music?
It's actually how I spend most of my days in the background.
I love it. Yeah, thanks for turning off the disco ball before you came on stage. I appreciate that. So Ian, great to have you. Thank you for being here. You heard the discussion of Ryan and I at the beginning. When you just think of time, what does that mean to you, and what is your kind of approach to managing it?
Yeah, I mean, as we know, it's one of the only resources we can manufacture more of. So really got to think about what, as you said, priorities is everything. Understand what do you actually care about, and how do you make the time work for you versus letting time just have its way with you.
Yeah, it really gets away. So, I mean, as the CEO of Phalanx, I mean, obviously that takes a great deal of your time. Could you tell us just a little bit about what Phalanx is and how you kind of spend your time there?
Yeah, so we're a cybersecurity startup specifically focused in protecting data security, and we have venture investors, we got angel investors, so that also has a number of things associated with requirements. But ultimately, it really does come down to understanding how to say no, and understand who do you need to talk to when. And it's not about, oh, I'm too important for this, or I'm too fancy for that. It's ultimately, if you said yes to everything, I'm already on so many meetings every single day. If I said yes to everything, there's literally not enough hours in the day to sit on all those meetings.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said yes to this meeting, because we are all benefiting from your knowledge and from your experience. Just to kind of follow up on that, and then Ryan, I'd love your thoughts on this afterwards. And again, chat, if you have questions, drop them in there. I will be flagging them. If I don't ask them right away, we will ask them before the show ends. How do you say no, Ian? Like, what's your calculus here?
Yeah. So it starts with what's the end state goal, right? So if you have like a North Star that you're using for, and again, I use this for actually a lot of different, I think about all the things I'm doing as different swim lanes, I guess. And each of those has an end state goal associated with it. And then so, for Phalanx, obviously, when we're trying to go to business, we're, again, with the investors, we need some sort of exit activity. So figuring out what's going to get us there. And, as a CEO, part of my roles is laying out strategic goals for the entire organization. So if I don't know it, we're in big trouble, right? So for us, it's like, hey, this is our goal. And when I think about an opportunity, how does that play into one of those goals? If it's, for majority of the day, it's how does that go towards Phalanx goals? But as you mentioned, with family or any other side projects that are going on, when you bring in opportunities, think about how does that lead you to actually where you're trying to go versus, just a thing that you could be doing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the strategy sort of starts as here's what to do, right?
Right.
In the categories. So how do you balance the things that show up that don't have anything to do with that strategy, but maybe is something to do? Do you just say no to it? Do you push it off to somewhere else? Like that, it seems like that might be a distraction.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah. So, but really, it goes into, that's why I think having some sort of long-term goals and strategy is important. Is at the end of the day, you can use that as your evaluation mechanism. So let's say an opportunity comes in that isn't immediately beneficial to what's going on at Phalanx and isn't immediately beneficial to some of the others, let's say side projects, but it is to, this one thing that I was planning on doing, further down the road. and it's a kind of opportunity, once in a while, once in a lifetime kind of opportunity, then you want to make some more decisions based off of that. Like, can I take on this from a time perspective? How's that going to negatively impact my other lines of effort that I'm doing? But if it's really just, you don't see how it fits into the grand scheme of anything, and then you got to think about, is this like a hobby type thing? Am I interested in it? And if it's not playing towards your goals, not interesting to you, not helping you or your family, whatever, then why do it? Like if the answer to that sometimes is because I'm uncomfortable saying no, get comfortable saying no. That's not a good reason to say yes.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of things as being an entrepreneur that you need to get comfortable saying. Like we talked to Ben Johnson last week. Catch last week's episode if you want to see this. But one of the lessons he had was hire slow, fire fast. And it wasn't necessarily that you want to fire people like you're some, big guy on the mountain. It's just, like it's a conversation you have to have. And same thing you're saying about having to say no occasionally. It's just there's uncomfortable things, but I mean that's how we grow, right? Is by leaning into uncomfortable and getting experience with it.
Right, because I always like to, when mentioning actually getting uncomfortable, it's like if you were to stay in the land of comfort, you pretty much get as far as you are, because what you did got you where you are. If you want to go anywhere else, you have to step into something uncomfortable, and the more you get comfortable with that process, the faster and more you can grow.
So I got a question for you, and this is kind of big picture stuff, Ian, but you're talking about all the stuff you're doing with Phalanx, the tough conversations, the decision points. What made you want to start a business in the first place? That's a good question that a lot of people, maybe don't know how to ask themselves,
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's one of the most important things to consider before you start a business. For me personally, it's my passion for building. I just love, and this is across multiple disciplines and just areas. I just love making stuff, and I love vision building for one, and building something towards a vision. But two, it's just the passion of just organizing and creating something out of nothing. That's always something I've wanted to do, and I always wanted to do that in a business sense. Interestingly, I didn't always want to do that with venture investors, and so we could talk about it in a sec, but there was a couple different versions of how I wanted to eventually start a business that could have happened, and this is the one that we ended up finding some great opportunities for.
Cool. Yeah, actually, maybe walk us through that a little bit, because I think it'd be helpful to hear, right? So, of the options that you have, you choose one, and then you think through, all right, what do I need to do to get there? Which starts forcing the strategy and the prioritization, or maybe it's the other way around. Like, walk us through a little bit of that. Like, how did it start?
Yeah. So, and the one thing I would say that I wish I did is start earlier. So I spent maybe a decade or so being like, I wish I want to start a business, but I don't know how to do it. Part of it, I was active duty in the military, so I wasn't going to go off and do something that didn't work with that. But that being said, I could have started. There was a number of businesses I could have started as an active duty officer that I could have run on the side. That would have all worked out. I would have learned a lot. Maybe it wouldn't be around still, but hey, that could have been my transition plan too. But yeah, so for me, I was like, I don't know how to start. I don't know where to get the money, and that was the part that I was like, where do you get the money to start up? And I had some background in the SIPR program, the Small Business Innovation Research grants and contracts that you get from the government, which I think is a great program. I always thought that that's how I was going to start a business, was find a topic that likely fit in the AI cyber realm, and then build a business out of that. But what I did was I got to the point where I was like, I want to do this. And then I was like, I don't know how to do this. Let me just start talking to people. And then so I just, started talking, and that's where the opportunity started opening up. I was just like, I'm trying to start a business. It's roughly around this kind of thing. And people start introducing you to other people. And that's eventually how we ended up getting our first investment money, and the Techstars Accelerator and all that.
So was it around the problem you were trying to solve? So like, hey, we want to solve data loss prevention, right? Like I want to start a business, and then you figure I want to do it around like say DLP, right? And then you get started. Is that sort of how it went, or where did the problem you were trying to solve play into that whole splitting the beans piece,
So
right?
it's for me personally, it was I want to start a business. And the second part was, okay, what kind of business should I start?
Yeah. What do I
And
want to
so
do?
I looked at like what is my skill sets and what would be viable businesses based off these skill sets. So that's why I was like, there's a number of government topics in the SIPR program that it could be applicable. So I was like, that could be one direction. Obviously, in the venture-backed tech startup world, there's a lot of problems that need to be solved in the cyber realm. And after that, it really went down to, we got a rough theme. We have a rough funding source. Now let's make sure that whatever we're building is solving a real pain point for real customers.
Love it. And Casually Joseph brings in a relevant question to the conversation. He wanted you to go a little bit deeper, if you would, Ian, on how did you identify the niche that you were getting into and developing the idea for, both initially and while you're growing the business?
Yeah, so I mean, niching down is super important. I think we've all heard so many times that if you are selling to everybody, you're selling to nobody. So for us, the big piece of it was customer discovery, and actually, this is a part where I like to bring in some of the PhD research approach to it all. Is that you want to go talk to potential customers from a research standpoint, in terms of like, you don't want to go in guns blazing with the sale. You want to understand what are their actual needs, and this is something that we've actively felt the difference of trying to force feed a sale versus somebody who actively has the need for what we're trying to sell. It's night and day. One is like meetings, demos, like pushing, and one is like, I'm ready to buy right now. And you're like, don't you need demos or something? They're like, I need this. Let me buy right now. And so the more you can niche down, the faster you get to that. And the only way to get to that is talking to people. So I always like to say, from a B2B standpoint, talk to at least 10 people that are within your customer profile. So, if you're, let's say you're like, I think I want to sell to barber shops that are at least 15 employees or whatever, because I'm selling this, POS system for barbers. So like, that's your hypothesis. And then you want to go talk to owners of barber shops to see, what are they using right now? What pain do they have with it, if any? And then once you've collected all that information, then you can look at your offering and say, is this offering solving a real problem for them, or am I just trying to force something onto them? And then never say that that you're offering something that doesn't exist, because there's always something. So for cybersecurity especially, you're gonna talk to some people and you're like, well, they don't have cyber, therefore I am the solution for them because they have no cyber. And the reality is, you're not selling cyber against cyber, or cyber against nothing, in terms of them being like, I'm trying to buy your cyber. You're selling cyber against their current status quo. And that's probably one of the hardest things to sell against. So if you look at it and you're like, oh, there's so much market opportunity because none of these people have cyber solutions, that's actually not the case. Like, what you're looking at is, there's so much, nobody has cyber solutions, so I have to fight and educate people against the status quo, because there's a reason why they're not purchasing cyber solutions, because it's not like you're the only cyber solution provider out there.
Yeah, precisely. And it sounds like there's two pieces. There's what you're good at, right? And then there's the market. But what's interesting is and we talked about this with Ben last week, is there's the market that might be there, might be the viable market or most addressable market or whatever, but are they actually going to buy what you're selling, right? And so there becomes this question of like, okay, yeah, I'm good at this. This might be my niche. There might be a market available for it. But then the question that you're addressing is, will they actually buy it? Right. So inside of the addressable market, like, can you actually compete in that space for your particular product? So can you say a little bit more about that? Like, how did you start to discern that particular part of the market out from the solution you were providing?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with what exists. What are they using right now to solve that problem for that niche? And again, the answer is not nothing at all. Even if it's actually nothing, it's not nothing. It's, hey, because for example, we tried to sell into legal tech, or the legal services space. Still think there's some great applicability there. People are always like, legal services, this is perfect for them. But the reason it's so hard to sell at least data loss prevention to legal services, even if they don't have data loss prevention tools or any kind of cybersecurity, it's a lot of them, the ones that we talk to that don't, say that they've established legal processes to cover their butts essentially, and they're like, because of that, if there's a data breach, we're all good. We don't need the cyber. And so you say, well, but the data is still breached, and they say that's fine according to us. That's beyond the point. So like again, like from a cyber perspective, you're like, this is insane. But from a sales perspective, how are you going to convince someone is never going to buy until they get burned, right? So that's and for us, what we did essentially was these customer discovery interviews for months. We talked to a number, and it's always focusing on what is their experience, their pain points. Listen to them as much as possible, and don't try to sell your solution to them. Always leave with, hey, by the way, this is what we do. And usually they want to, once you start asking those kind of questions, especially if it's something that they're interested, at some point they go, okay, well, what do you do? Because you're asking some questions that are addressing a lot of, or that are in the zone of my pain points. So like, if you have a solution, I want to hear about it.
Yeah. I'm just like beside myself with them being like, oh, we got insurance for that, or like, no problem. But I almost feel like you need to bring like Phalanx magnets with you and just be like, put this on your fridge, and when you get breached, you can call us because you're gonna want to talk to us.
Yeah. I mean that's exactly what like marketing is, right? Like, and that's applicable even down to like if you're a mom and pop, or just starting off managed service provider, going out in the world, you're gonna try to sell. Let's say you're trying to sell cyber services that you want to manage, or let's say you're a pen tester. You're gonna hit a lot of people that are like, I'm good. They're like, I'm good to go. Either I have something, or I don't need it just yet. It's not the right timing. But if you have, magnet on their fridge or any kind of like something for them to refer, just like them remember that you exist when the need comes, then like that sales like immediate.
Perfect. I love it. So you mentioned earlier, one of the earlier decision points you had to make was, do I fund this? Do I VC? You had mentioned angel investors and such earlier, but a lot of people in chat right now, including my good friend, Joe Hudson. Good to see you, Joe. They want to ask themselves, that question, right? Because they might be early on their entrepreneur journey. We saw Kim and Rhonda in chat talking about like basically wanting to start and still continuing to delay. So when they get to that point to make the decision to bootstrap or VC, what kind of logic did you apply, and what are your lessons learned from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with what kind of business are you building? Because at the end of the day, there is a lot of consequences with depending on your funding source. But there's no wrong answer. So like, I know a lot of people are afraid, to hear their horror stories of VC. That's not necessarily, there's a lot of good VCs out there. It's a great funding source depending on what you're trying to do. So for example, let's say you want to build a cyber product, then there's a lot of effort that goes into creating and building that product. And that all during that time, you're probably not making any money. So if that's the case, you want to remember that, okay, so like there's a building phase and then there's a selling phase. And how do I fund the building phase? And maybe are you just building it on the side while you're working a job, on the weekends? But that's a good opportunity to take in some external investment money, because they'll say, hey, I'm going to fund you to fund the thing. I'm going to fund the building of this and the selling of this. But if you take in external investment money, you got to think about, again, the consequences. When it's VC, there's a certain type of math associated with that. And they need your exit for your company to be like very high. So for example, if you were to sell for 2x of what what they've invested, for most people, if you go into the stock market, if you're angel, most investors, if they doubled their money, that's pretty good. Like, we're all pretty happy if you double your money.
Yeah.
For a VC investor, that's not enough, because let's say they invest in 10, because they're trying to invest in something that can explode essentially. So let's say they invest in 10 companies, 6 or 7 of them they expect to completely fail. 1 or 2 of them they expect that 1.5, 2x or so. So you think about that from the math perspective. If 7 companies have zero return, or negative, negative 100% return, 2 companies have doubled it, you're still looking at 4, you have 4 out of the 10 essentially. And at that point, that fund is losing money. So they need one of those companies to at least, they pretty much, when they think about investing, they're thinking every single company I invest in needs the potential to fully return the fund. So that way that's kind of how the math works. So, when you're thinking about what are you building, a cyber product has a chance, like a cyber SaaS product can have the multiples where you can sell it for, like, if that thing can sell that way. A services company doesn't have that kind of multiple. So if you are, let's say, a pen testing service, like you're probably looking at like a 2, maybe 3x on your exit because of all the labor involved. So if the max you can probably ever do is 2 to 3x, and let's say they invest $1 million and you need to exit out at least $10 million, then that means you need to be making like $5 million in recurring revenue. Actually, probably EBITDA at that point because you're a services company. But on the flip side, if you're a cyber SaaS product, like $1 million will get you there. People will probably buy, potentially can buy you out for a 10x multiple. So that's another thing to think about is what are you trying to do opens up opportunities. If you're doing a services company, you're probably not getting VC. If you're doing a product company, like some of the other options might not be there as well, or like you'll have, you have different options for what you're trying to do. And the last thing before I'll mention is between angels and VC, angel investors are investing their own money and they do it, kind of as they want to do it individually. VCs they have people invest into VCs to manage their funds so they are responsible back to their limited partners that have invested in those funds. So that's also why they have to operate in a certain way. But because an angel investor is investing in just you, or just you and just this, just that, a 2x return for an angel is actually also good. So if you only take angel investments to start this thing up, and you have some sort of 2x return, 3x return, that potentially is a full success for everyone on board. Even though if you were to do that plus a VC, that VC would be like, this is a failure. But everyone else would be like, to include the founders, would be like, this is great. So that's another good thing to think about as you're looking for funding sources.
Oh my God. I just wind it back. I need to wipe my brow, Ian. You just backed the dump truck up and dropped knowledge bombs on me. While I gather myself, Ryan, do you have thoughts on Ian's comments around bootstrapping versus VC?
Oh, I love it. I love it because it helps make a distinction, because with those that are listening, like there's this, okay, do I go get money? What kind of money do I need? Or can I bootstrap it, right? Build it, Moonlight or whatever, to get to a point where then it makes sense to make that decision. And I think you laid it out quite nicely in terms of, look, if you, from the development space, right? Developing a product takes time and money, right off the bat. And we don't always have that capital available. So there are sources of, it sounds like there's 3 sources you actually identified, which I thought were quite nice. One is the government-backed money, sort of the funds that are out there that don't have a huge rate of return required because the government might be backing them in terms of initiatives. There's VC side, which you laid out quite nicely, and there's angel investors. The interesting thing there is one of the things that I thought was wildly interesting, we don't always talk about, is, VCs are typically, covering a portfolio. Not all the companies they're investing in are expected to do well. So my question there would be, how do you make sure, if you go the VC route, how do you make sure you're not one of the 7 that fail in the portfolio, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a couple different comments on that there, because one thing I didn't mention is depending on the funding source, there's a time associated with that. So when you bootstrap, you have the most flexibility because you have the least amount of people to report to, essentially, because it's your own money. Like, you are funding you, and therefore the rate of return is what do you want for your rate of return? But when you get angel investors, VCs are on a schedule. So ideally you're returning that money, in like less than 10 years. So that is something, because you can't go low and slow with VC money. And then that goes into your question, is that, and this has actually kind of changed over the last couple of years as well, in terms of what people will say that they're interested in. Because generally it's been pour all that money on growth regardless of profitability, because we need that thing to go up. In the last couple of years, it's been kind of two camps, one being like, actually, we care about profitability. And then the other camp being like, actually, no, because that's kind of defeats the purpose. So it's hard to say. It really depends on the fund that you're working with and the VCs that you're specifically pitching and working with. Because sometimes they want you to fail fast, essentially. They're like, take this money, go as fast as you can with this money, and figure out whether it's worth something or not. Like, I don't want a zombie company on my portfolio. Like, either go well or fail. That's fine. Other ones are going to be like, I rather you survive and give me my money back, kind of thing, or 2x return or 1x return, than fail, even if it means you're not going to be our star portfolio company. So I think it really depends on, again, who you're working with. They always say, like, it's almost like a marriage. Like, you think about when you take in that money from investors, you're working with them for a very long time. And you're, depending on what the style of it all is, you're probably your responsibility to be reportable to them. And at the end of the day, that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, it's almost, you kind of laid out nicely, where it's almost just as much as the problem you're solving for with your service or your product. On the flip side, from the cash side, there's this: what are they actually buying? Are they buying growth? Are they buying people? Are they buying services? Like, what are they actually paying for? Right. So there's two sides of that same coin, it sounds like.
Yeah, 100%. Because at the end of the day, it's not a charity. They're not like, even like, so, as a veteran, like, even the veterans focused funds, it isn't a veterans charity for business building. It's, hey, we're a VC fund looking to get our returns. And our thesis is that veterans produce a certain amount of, or IC based community, produce a certain amount of quality company and yada, yada, because of their expertise, whatever, expecting the exact same, VC style return. So that is something to consider. Is no one's out there just donating money to your business.
At the end of the day, it's, it might be just the business of lending money, but it is a business for profit. Right. And those expectations are definitely set there. All right. So we should have called this the money episode, but we're going to navigate the boat into the time harbor here right after the break. We got some quick words from our exclusive sponsor, ACI Learning, the official learning platform for the Cyberstarters program.
You chose a career in cybersecurity, and you follow this podcast because you're passionate about being at the top of your field. But let's face it, not all training is created equal. Don't settle for boring training that leaves you uninspired. You deserve the best to support your dreams. At ACI Learning, our instructors are legends in the field. Our studios are state-of-the-art. We're always on so that you can be too. We're equipped to pivot and cover every emerging trend in cybersecurity. Because in this fast-paced industry, you need training that keeps up. But it's not just about the expertise. Our on-demand video training is designed to be actually fun to watch. We believe learning should be exciting, not a chore. We offer training in every major vendor and certification. ACI Learning is on it, so you can be too. And don't just take our word for it. See what others are saying on Trustpilot. Real reviews from real professionals who have experienced our offerings firsthand. Choose ACI Learning, because support for your cybersecurity career deserves nothing but the best.
All right. Thanks again to ACI Learning for sponsoring Cyberstarters. We're talking with Ian Garrett, founder and CEO at Phalanx, about cyber entrepreneurship, and we're talking about time. So, Ian, with the focus of time, what's the reality of building a cyber business? Is you got all the time in the world? You got and I know we talked a little bit about the intro, but let's unpack it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, starting with why? Why are you starting a business? Some people, it's the money. Well, for one, if you're starting a business, remember it's money is an important part of it. Again, it's not a charity. But some people, it's about the time, like time flexibility. Hey, I want to have the ability to do whatever I want during the day and service customers on my time. I don't want to, some people's like, I don't want a boss or whatever. So understanding that to start makes a big difference on how does your day actually look. So, for us as a cyber startup, our days look very similar to if we were just working, a corporate job in terms of, we have a lot of structure in our schedules. There's a team, there's all of us as a team. We know when we're working, obviously as a startup, an entrepreneur, and the founders especially. Sometimes the hours bleed over before and after. But at the end of the day, it's still structured in a very similar style as you would see in a corporate setting. But if we were, more of a services small business, let's say, it very well could be, a little bit more atypical of a schedule.
Yeah, one of the things one of the things we talked about earlier, which was interesting, which people might find wildly relative, is how much time you actually spend selling the business, right? There's you're out there trying to build the business. You're doing all the internals, right? State registrations and registering, and different people getting your employment up, getting your HR, getting your benefits, all the things that you need to do to actually start a business functionally, right? Then there's the practice, right, of like actually practicing the trade. Either it's building out the DLP platform or providing the service. But then there's this piece where you teased out a little while ago, before we jumped on the call, which is like how much time you spend selling in the early days, because typically there isn't like a sales team out there selling your new brand, your new product, your new way of hitting the market. So say a little bit about that in terms of, the time management side of the house.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that you always hear about entrepreneurs is that, oh, we got so many hats. But one thing I think people don't realize as much is how much the sales marketing arm, like the actual bringing in business component of that, is important to it, especially as, like cyber practitioners. There's a tendency to feel like, oh, well, I have all of this knowledge and skill that's very valuable. And because of that, I should be able to successfully do that. The people I'm working for, they don't get it. Like they're just business people. So like, let me just go out on my own. But the reality is, if you build it, put up a nice website and go, talk to some people in networking thing, like that's not going to build your business enough, right? Like you probably have some network. Your initial customers will likely be word of mouth. But at the end of the day, you need some sort of functional mechanism to bring in more customers, whatever that go-to-market looks like. But the reality is that is how your business becomes a business. You actually doing the practitioning is like, we mentioned it earlier, the golden state. Like if you do really, really well as an entrepreneur, let's say if you started, as a practitioner, if you do really, really well at what you're supposed to, starting your business, you will actually never do any practitioning ever again. Like, so I think a lot of people starting like realize that is, if you do really well at your job, you will never touch cyber practitioning. Like you hire people to do the servicing of your business, and you do more and more on the business side of your business, which is, maybe at some point you can grow big enough, you can actually hire the people to do the sales. So you don't have to be on the boots on ground on that per se, but you're going to be very, very dialed in with those folks, because that's what's going to keep things alive to keep the practitioners going.
And that could be a really interesting distinction between starting your own business or being a full-time practitioner, right?
Right. And most people, I mean, the reality is, I talk to a lot of people that their why on why they want to start a business is because they feel like they're spending too much time in their jobs doing non-cybery things that they think is a waste of, like, let's say, oh, I'm doing training and this and that and all this dumb reporting, and I think it's a waste of my time. I should be doing, like, I'm so good at cyber, I should just be cybering all day, every day. And starting your own business not only reduces the amount of time you can be out there cybering, it increases the amount of kind of BS at the end of the day, because that's what keeps the engine going. So it could be that, maybe you're not actually looking to start your own business. You're looking for, a role where you can really focus on cyber stuff.
Yeah,
Which may be a startup, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. So, sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
No, it's good. I mean, it's you're busting so many myths, Ian, and I hope people in chat are really enjoying this conversation and understanding some of the lessons learned that Ian is dropping on us to avoid us having to work 2 years on our own business and then learn these things. For example, I thought the guy that I work for had his feet kicked up and he was on a yacht in the harbor out there just collecting off my back. But as you just said, you basically are working like a 9 to 5, just you're doing something else. Another one that I hear all the time is, I'm a practitioner. They charge $100 an hour for me and I get paid $50. This is ridiculous. Like, I'll just go off and make the $100 an hour myself without any thought into marketing, sales, client engagement, client, retention, like all the things that like that person who's, probably taking a haircut at $50 an hour is making. So I really appreciate some of the realities that you're dropping. To that point, though, Ian, there's this concept. If I don't know if you've ever read the E-Myth. It's like a popular entrepreneur book, but the E-Myth Revisited. As I read it, the guy who wrote it, he talks about working on the business versus working in the business, and like you can kind of become almost constrained to working in the business. And to use an example, right? Like you open your own baking company because you're awesome at making apple pies, best apple pies ever. And you work from sun up to sundown baking pies and throwing them out. So you never have time to like work on what's your long-term strategy. And, like, are you going to open a second location or whatever? So under that premise, Ian, can you kind of talk about how much, I'm curious, really, start off, how much time do you spend working in your business, like servicing clients, all those things, even going to meetings and selling versus working on your business, like uplifting, thinking about strategy, thinking about direction and stuff like that? I'd really love to know kind of like the percentages. And then if you could drill down into that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing actually goes into what you were mentioning on, like, hey, my hourly, they're charging $200 an hour. I only get to see 100 of it. If you are out there, let's say as a cyber consultant charging $200 an hour, at the end of the day, you have two decisions. Your decision is I take in all that money for me and I can live off this $200 an hour. But then what you're doing at that point is you're only working in the business because 100% of the money coming in is going into your bank account to then be used to live, which means there's zero money which then means you have to do one, spend more time to go build your business, or figure out, take in less money and then use that money to go pay for things to build your business to save you time. So that's also another big key, big eye opener for people as they realize, oh, like after I account for the benefits I no longer have because I'm self-employed, plus all this, what it costs to do marketing and bookkeeping, blah, 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 like all these functions that I'm either not good at or it's a liability if I'm doing it. Like, so accounting, for example, if you don't know what you're doing, don't just wing it. That's not the move. So you're probably going to you're paying for that service. You're paying for that. You're paying for marketing. You're, say you're not the best website designer, hoster, or whatever, like, or you don't have a server in your house that you're running your website out. You're paying for that, like infrastructure. And then all of a sudden that $200 an hour, whittles down, and then you realize, oh, I have, after infrastructure costs, I have, let's say, $100 an hour. Okay, like $100 an hour, that's still looking pretty good. Oh, it turns out if I want to, pay for someone to do some, let's say, SEO work, or, pay for some people to do some sales stuff, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, now I got to pay them $50 an hour, of those kind of resources to actually get more business. And then you realize, that your take home is actually, way down here. You start at 200 and you're like, oh, I got actually $25 left for me.
You're actually taking a loss.
Yeah, it turns out if I just stayed at my old job, I was making a lot more because they figured out a more optimal way to do it. So so with that being said, going back to your original question of how much on versus in, for us, it's hard to break it into a percentage because it depends on the week. Some weeks are heavy on the in, some weeks are heavy on the on. But the big thing for us is that I have two other co-founders. So, if it was just me, then working on the business would be so difficult because, you know, at the end of the day, it'd be so much in. But with multiple co-founders, then we can spread it out. And then it also allows me to do more of the, you know, business building component as a CEO, because I have other co-founders that are, you know, doing some more of the in work, let's say, but that's fine. Somebody needs to work in the business. And that allows me, you know, more freedom to then, when I bring them on for, let's say we're having strategy meetings, you know, I can queue it up in a way that I can maximize the amount of time that's extracting that founder to founder knowledge, without them having to get up to speed and spending time on that. So, you know, again, another kind of time optimization type thing.
I love it. It's funny. I think another kind of eye opener is like, it depends on the week working on the business versus working in the business. You know, I myself, I don't know. I mean, obviously you're bigger stakes. You've got co-founders and stuff. You're a different animal. Same with Ryan. Ryan's business is a different animal too. But I find myself breaking my life up into quarters. Like this quarter, I'm going to go really hard on product and you know, keep the lights on and, you know, touch the button that has to be touched every 90 minutes. And then next quarter, I'm going to, like, you know, uplift production and do a brand identity lift and digital, you know, like all that stuff. So I don't know if that's just simple-minded and me trying to like reconcile it in my head, my simple head, because I don't have a business degree, but that's how I've done it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ian, relative to that approach.
I mean, it's pretty spot on in terms of even how things accidentally shook out. So we found that for us, at least, a lot of what we can time-wise afford to do is based off of sales cycles. And then so throughout the year, you know, we're in our fourth year, just completed our third year. We have enough cycles now that we can kind of see when sales ebb and flows. So there's certain times that, you know, we're able to sell a lot, which means we're doing a lot of onboardings, which means, you know, there's a lot of in the business kind of work. And then, you know, towards the end of the year, big holiday season, pretty much like everyone's gone. Usage drops down, sales, everyone's like, hey, I'll catch you in the next year. So, you know, Q1 expects a lot of sales activity, but Q4 expects things to be, you know, a little slower, which then we use that time to essentially pile on strategy meeting for us so that we can, you know, do as much upfront for the next year as possible. Obviously, you know, we need plenty of check-ins throughout the year. Nothing stays the same. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're not starting from scratch, and we're not starting without a map. So, you know, exactly how you said. And actually, speaking of quarters, I actually like to split my days into quarters.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, as much as possible for a couple different reasons. One is, you know, I'm able to have time that either I can focus in on. Sometimes it's like I need some heads down work. So I try to squeeze all my meetings into, you know, a quarter or two. But also it actually helps for burnout and emotional stability wise, if you think about it that way. Because a lot of times, let's say something bad happens, right? Like something, you know, you slipped on a banana peel and you landed in a puddle. Like in the morning, spilled your coffee. Like that's a bad, you know, if you're thinking about it at a day at a time, that's just a bad day. Like I just had a bad day. But if you think about it in quarters, then hey, Q1 of today was a bad day, but you know what? I'm in Q2 now and my lunch is really good. Q2 is really good. I can spend most of my day having a good day today because I only had a bad Q1.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's like such a way to fail fast, essentially, to use that term. Ryan, how do you break your time up? I'm curious. Again, all three of us are entrepreneurs and different types of businesses and sizes. So it's interesting to kind of get a consensus here.
Yeah, I do it in thirds, but I think what's important is to identify what's important to you based on your strategy. Like mine's in thirds in terms of like pipeline, people, infrastructure, right? But I'm running a service business, so that's sort of how it works, right? So those are the three categories that work well for me. But from a SaaS product standpoint, it might be different, right? It might be heads down technical work, outreach, you know, for number two. Number three might be, you know, even further outreach, right? Like the really long balls you're trying to do from a selling standpoint. But the key is, I think, and Ian, what I'd love to hear from you is, how do you avoid burnout? Because we can spend a lot of time on things that we're either just not good at or don't like to do. If you spend a lot of time there, you're just going to wind up wiping yourself out. So I'd love to hear sort of how you avoid burnout for you and your co-founders and your team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really goes into what causes your burnout. So I think a lot of people, when they think of burnout, they think it's I'm working too much. As an entrepreneur, you're just gonna be working a lot. But I don't actually think that's where the burnout comes from, because, for example, on the days and times that things are just exploding because of activity, good activity for us, like we're hyped, we're charged. We can go on for a long time, because if we're suffering from success, we actually don't find that we're burned out. We're just like, this is like, we're hyped. The parts that actually cause the burnout is when things are not happening, or when you're in that more of a, kind of researchy, finding product market fit, like the point where time in doesn't equal results out. Again, going back into PhD research, very similar as in the same sense of, you're going to spend a lot of hours on the input, and that's not going to equal your outputs, which is very different from working more of a standard job where they hired you for a job, and you doing that job is, I do the thing and things happen, and I get paid for that. In entrepreneurship, is you do a ton of things. Some of it is just stuff that you have to do for the business. Let's say, again, going kind of the operational, like, oh, I need to set up accounting or whatever. That you don't really see any good results from. I mean, ideally, it's like that's just is what it is. So that's not exciting results. And then for customer outreach, you're going to do, especially if that's not what you love doing, you're going to spend a lot of time on that. You're going to get a lot of just rejections and no's, and you're not going to fully, like, what you're doing doesn't quite 100% map, because you're going to do this 5 times, or more like 100 times. One person's going to say yes. 99 people are going to say no. And then you got to sit there and be like, well, it worked once. Why? Why did it work the one time? What did I do different? If something, obviously tons of variables. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I think causes the burnout is doing things that you're not seeing the results in, doing things that you don't like doing, and then feeling discouraged. So to combat burnout, I think it's a couple different things. One is understand that, when successful, work doesn't bring burnout. So don't blame your burnout on, oh, because I work too hard. Blame your burnout on, I'm being discouraged. And then when you restructure your perspective, then you realize, I'm feeling discouraged because it feels like I'm spinning my tires because of all these inputs equals this many outputs right now. And then if that's the case, then realize maybe you just need a couple of small wins to feel better. And then, so that's where, break things down. Like, hey, my day's first third kind of sucked because I did all this outreach and it went nowhere. But you know what? Someone just paid an invoice in the second half of my day, and that actually is great. Like, business is happening. Or I just got a really, 5-star review on my Google business profile because the customer really loved what we're doing. Like, that's, that feels good, right? So I would say, to avoid burnout, look to fill those times of despair with little things you can do that do have a 1-to-1 input to output, and then savor those moments. Like, feel good about doing those works that you can just do. And then also, every little success, just record them, so that when you're feeling bad and you're spinning your wheels, you can look back on your charts of success and realize that you probably have come a lot farther than you feel like you have. There's even incorporating a business or starting your LLC, like that's a big deal. So, like, remember, that's an important. Talking to one customer, that's important. Closing a customer, that's huge. Like, so there's a lot of things that you've done that are important. Just remember them and write them down, so that when you're feeling bad, you have somewhere to go, and then also have, again, little things that you can do to feel like you're actually getting work done.
Yeah, I feel like it's so easy, human nature. It's just so easy to kind of overlook the wins as like, oh, that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen. And then the challenges, the losses, the stressors, whatever, like, it's quick to point that out and be like, like that's the problem. So I definitely appreciate your insights into championing those wins and having perspective. And just to share one, because I feel so passionate about it, because this is the time episode, one of the things that, for me personally, because I deal with a lot of stuff and struggle with burnout from time to time, is a little bit of meditation, but like my uncle, who's like a clinical guy, clinical mental health guy, he's like, you just take 5. If you're so busy, Jerry, take 5 minutes and just turn off everything and just chill. Just sit for 5 minutes. And he's like, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I really got 5 minutes. He's like, you don't have 5 minutes, Jerry? You don't have 5 minutes. He says, if you don't have 5 minutes, you got to find 10 minutes because you got a problem, bro. So from time to time, and it's amazing how 5 simple, short minutes can feel like a lifetime, and how it kind of frees you up and gives you that perspective. But final thoughts on that. And then I want to talk about a couple other things, Ian, if you got it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're feeling super burned out, just like find 5 minutes and go step outside and take a breath of fresh air, because get some sunlight, like at the end of the day, and disconnect, because I think a lot of us also tend to use our downtime with more. I always say like the day is moving from different screens to big screens, to eventually the smaller screen. Because like actually and I'm trying to do this less, but it's like going as a bedtime transition. It's like going from TV big screen or like computer bigger screen to phone smaller screen, finally to smartwatch smaller screen, and then go to bed. And it's like, that's, you don't want to live your life screen to screen all the time. So but it's like, let's say you have you're watching little YouTube videos or Instagram reels or something, entertainment, but at the end of the day, your brain's still cranking through, and sometimes it's nice to just don't do anything, don't touch a screen, don't read an email. Just, if you're having lunch, just have the lunch. don't look at a thing. And it's hard, the more you're habitually ingesting information, especially an entrepreneur, you're habitually looking at your emails and like thousands of emails. But the more you can just take a quick break, at least once a day, right? Like, and it shouldn't be that hard, because you should be eating food, you should be using the restroom, you should be doing all these things. Like,
yeah,
factor in one of those times to just do nothing for 1 minute. Try 60 seconds, put a timer in. I think a lot of people find that 60 seconds of not looking at digital media is actually a lot harder than it should be, and then build your tolerance up from there.
I love it. And to translate for Gen Z, Ian is saying touch grass.
Yeah.
So this is Ian Garrett. Really quick, Ian, I just want to share this with people. This is your business, Phalanx. If you'd like to learn a little bit about Ian's business and Ian himself, phalanx.io. Anything to kind of share about the website when people go there, Ian, if they'd like to learn a little bit?
Yeah, so we're actually about to do a shift in our messaging on the website. So we are data loss prevention, but not in a scary way. So usually it's like rules based. It's this monolith thing. We break everything down into small teams and individuals. So everything is very quick to deploy in less than an hour, very easy to deal with. And most importantly, we're about to switch all this messaging to be focused towards managed service providers, because we're one of the few solutions that can offer that DLP capability in a way that doesn't take a million hours for managed service providers to provide to their customers. Again, going back to time, part of their services business is how much time per customer. And if they're doing what usually like Microsoft DLP is, it doesn't work for the business model. So we wanted to provide something that they can actually offer to their customers that doesn't take time away from them, so that they can spend time doing other things. And that'll be reflected on the website soon.
And that's phalanx.io. And one other pet project. I think this is so cool and so relevant to our audience. What are we looking at here, Ian?
Yeah, so side project. And part of it, again, so one of my biggest barriers to entry for me was I didn't even know how to start, and I didn't have any network to start. So what I've been putting together essentially is just lessons learned and a website to help people just get off the ground, step one, moving from that 0 to 1. So on here, you'll figure out, you'll see just how do I go about, how to initial sales for, I do it from a B2B perspective just because, that's my experience. Would love to get any insights from people from B2B sense to add into it. But, I have links to the kind of software we use for incorporating the business, stuff that doesn't break the bank, different tools, different tech stacks, different, guides. And at the end of the day, it is all an evolving project. So I would love as much feedback and questions. So like if people have the topics that they want to hear about, like tell me so that I can write about it. Because at the end of the day, it's hard to move it out of your brain onto onto some sort of medium. But in the entrepreneurial sense, just ship it. And worst case is that people tell me I'm dumb, and then I can fix it.
I love it. So that's crowdfuel.co. As Ian put it to me, if you want to do a tech startup, crowdfuel.co will take you from step 0 to step 1, right? That's basically the gist of it. Awesome. All right, everybody, go check out Ian's business, Phalanx.io, and his side project, crowdfuel.co. Ian Garrett, thank you so much for sharing all your insights and knowledge. And again, this is the time episode. I know how valuable your time is. Thank you for giving us, Ryan, myself, and all of chat your time today. Genuinely appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate having me on.
Absolutely. All right, let's go, Ryan. Let's do our key takeaways, okay?
Let's do it. Thanks, Ian.
All right. Hey, Ryan, that was super sick, dude. Like there's a million other questions I want to have for Ian. I might like hoard him and get him on a call and ask him a million questions. What were your key takeaways today?
Yeah, as 100% with you on that one, especially with the time episode, right? You want to go down all these rabbit holes, but you only have so much time. So in that, I thought one of the things he teased out, which is we don't always talk about, but it's really important, is that just saying no to a lot of things, right off bat, because you don't think about it. When you're starting a business, you're really hungry, right? You're looking for almost any angle you can get to do whatever it is your business is doing, right? If you're selling a service, or if you're trying to build a product, you're trying to recruit people, you're trying to get it, you're saying, you want to say yes a lot because yes feels good and we're moving the ball forward. But it was a really interesting point of view about like, yeah, there's a lot of no you're saying. And because all of those things that you say yes to have a maintenance tail. So if they don't line up with your strategy and where you're trying to get to, they can actually, even though you're being nice or wanting to bring it into your portfolio or whatever it is you're doing, you have to now manage it, what you say yes to. So I thought it was a really interesting point to very specifically sort of, start with the no in mind. He didn't say it that way, but it was, kind of way I took away. It was like, yeah, start with maybe it's a no and have to prove it's a yes. Because inside of that, like the two other big takeaways I got that support that is like, one, the challenge is your business has these needs that are different than the practitioner needs, and understanding that right off the bat, I think is really helpful for folks to sort of, think that through a little bit, because there's this bucket of time that's going to be spent building the business, and there's a whole different bucket of time that's going to be spent doing the business. So I love the way you tease that out too, of like do versus, in versus out. I think it's the way you put it, like sales or building the business, or, building the practice versus doing your cyber skills. And the last one, I think it's really important because we hit this all the time, is avoiding burnout. And, I thought what was really clever, what Ian teased out there, is like, number one, recognize it, right? A lot of times, especially entrepreneurs, we just keep going. We might be burned out, but we just keep pressing, and just taking a second to step back and be like, hey, you might be burning out here, is sort of, the acknowledgement piece that I don't think we talk about all the time, which might be helpful for folks to think about. And then, of course, celebrate wins to kind of get you reoriented to, yeah, you're actually being successful in certain areas, and then focus on what really matters. So those are kind of my top key takeaways. A lot of rich content, but those are the three things that kind of stuck out for me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a million things. I'm going to have ChatGPT go through it and make a bullet list of key findings. Two things that I took away. Again, I'm always looking at this through two lenses. One's for my own business and entrepreneurship, because I can basically stand on the shoulders of giants. Ian's made a lot of progress already that I can, yell up ahead in of the trail and get him to tell me what to do. But two things that jumped out to me. One was, it really does bust the myth of fighting the status quo for sales. Like, most people think, oh, I start a business, I'm competing. Like, I have a business, same business as Ryan, so I'm competing with Ryan. And as Ian pointed out, you're not. You're actually competing with businesses making investments into cybersecurity. You're not competing against other cyber businesses. You're competing against a business initiative that has nothing to do with technology, potentially. Like, oh, we're thinking about increasing like the number of conveyor belts we have in the Toledo plant, and that's $100,000. And you're like, our product's $100,000. And they're like, well, can you produce more product on our conveyor belt? And like, no, we're a DLP solution. They're like, I think we're done here. And you're like, So I think that's really eye-opening to think that it really is, I don't want to call it socially engineering, but you have to find the levers that apply to the individuals who control the purse strings to be able to help them understand the value proposition that you're bringing. You're not trying to hypnotize them and have them write a check to you. You want to deliver value, but getting them to understand it. I'll tell you what, GRC people might be the best at sales because we speak to the business, right? We're not like, get out of here, nerd. And the other thing that he said real quick, don't wing it. Okay. Accounting, law, contracts, don't wing it. That's probably a best practice. Don't pretend you know what you're doing. Get an LLC correctly, get QuickBooks, get whatever you got to get, but certainly don't try to, get a journal and keep your own, your record keeping. Because when it comes time for the tax man, they don't make mistakes, right? They're going to come after you, and you don't want to learn that lesson the hard way. So those are my two key takeaways, Ryan.
Yeah, talk about avoiding burnout. Yeah, don't do things like accounting if you don't know it or don't like it. Leave it to the professionals because you will burn out fast.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I love it. All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Cyberstarters. I want to thank our guest, Ian Garrett, again. Also, all of you in chat who came with really, really supportive comments, great conversation, wonderful questions, a lot of value here. We definitely enjoyed it. Join us next week where our guest is going to be Grace Chi, founder of Pulse Dive. Many of you know that solution, threat intelligence. Grace is going to be dropping knowledge bombs on us. I can't wait. It's going to be super fun. On behalf of myself and my co-host, Ryan Leirvik, CEO of Neuvik, just so everyone knows, this guy's a boss himself. We want to thank all of you. And until next time, stay secure. Be well, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
If you got value from that amazing interview, be sure to check the entire back catalog of Cyberstarters interviews for more tips on launching and the effective business operations for cybersecurity entrepreneurs. You won't want to miss our next episode, I guarantee it. Join the Simply Cyber Discord server at simplycyber.io/Discord to chat with the larger community and be made aware when we go live. We want all your questions answered. Until next time, I'm Jerry for Cyberstarters. Stay secure.